Stop podcast surfing. You're in the right place. I've always wanted to sing. Hi, everyone. I am your host, Kimbralon B. I am a licensed counselor, but I'm not your counselor. I'm also the host of Good Tea and Reads. So I created Good Tea and Reads so we could use everyday topics, issues, and current events to explain the importance of mental health awareness. Mental health discussions are so important because so many suffer in silence or do not realize that they're dealing with mental health issues because of stigmas, society and family expectations, and other reasons. Some episodes on Good Tea and Reads are heavy and will make us think. Other episodes will be very enlightening or refreshing. But either way, you will have an awesome experience. Here's the disclaimer. Any information shared on Good Tea and Reads is not a substitute for seeking professional care from another professional. Any information shared on Good Tea and Reads is not meant to diagnose the subjects or persons discussed on this podcast. All right, so enough of this intro. All right, so go grab your cups really quick so I can pour this piping hot tea. Meet me on the inside at one, two, three. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Good Tea and Reads. I am your host, Kimbralon B. I am the hostess with the Most-est and so excited to be here with you this evening or morning or whenever you're listening to the show. All right, so how are you doing today? All right. Hope you're doing well. Everything is well over here. I'm pretty excited because I actually had a 3-day weekend and I was so excited because it gave me a chance to just replenish and just feel so refreshed. And sometimes we have to really do that. We just got to take a time out to take care of ourselves. So I was pretty excited about that. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. I just want to jump right in. So today's episode is titled Stigmas, the Tragic Read. It sounds like woo. Um, so today we'll actually be exploring stigmas and the impact of stigma in mental health. And I figured that I would take time out to talk about stigmas because I bring it up in every show. And honestly, there may be people out there that's not familiar with what stigmas are, right? And I don't want to bring shame to anyone, and I don't want to assume that everybody knows what stigmas are. So I decided to take time out and just walk it back just a little bit and talk about stigmas. And let me just be honest with you. Doing research on stigmas, I mean, I even learned more things about stigmas. So you may hear me say the word stigma a lot because we're talking about the word, right? All right. So we're getting ready to get started, how we always do. And most of all the listeners who's listened to the show before, you know what's about to happen next. But for those that are just listening for the very first time, welcome to Good Tea and Reads, okay? Feel free to jump in on this episode. And then after this episode, go back and check the other episodes out too. I try to cover like a wide array of topics to just promote mental health awareness. All right. So you can follow and share and then just jump right in. I'm excited to be back on track because I was a little under the weather. So I didn't actually record a show, but now I'm on top of my game now, y'all. I am too happy. All right, so enough of that. enough about me. So go grab your cups so I can pour this piping hot tea. All right, so go. All right, because I only have a few seconds for you to go grab your cups and go get your cozy chair because I only have so much time to talk before I lose people. Okay, sometimes if you go on and on and on and on and the beat don't stop until the break of dawn, no, I'm playing. Sometimes when you go on, you'll lose people. And really, since I'm talking about mental health awareness, I don't want to lose anyone's attention. Okay. Hopefully you got your cup and you're sitting in your cozy chair. Tell the kids, just give me an hour. Tell the boo, just give me an hour. Tell your coworker, hold on. We can catch up on break time. Okay. I'm working on a special project. And just take this time out for you. Really, it's for me and you, but it's mostly for you. Okay. This is my gift to you. All right. So I have a disclaimer that I play in the intro, and that's the overall disclaimer for the show. But I have a disclaimer in the show because some of the topics that I talk about, I just want to make sure that I put this disclaimer out specific to the show. So I will mention like several examples to provide insight on the impact of stigmas in mental health. I will more than likely provide insight using examples from the Black community because I'm merely just more familiar with those examples. Now, I know there could be a ton of examples out there. I'm not trying to make everything on race, because I know how we can get about that. I am merely using these examples to get the point across about stigmas in mental health, right? Usually I don't explain myself, or I'm getting ready to use this word loosely, defend my stance. But today, people are so extremely sensitive about race. Hence, this is why we have this big misunderstanding about diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, for this podcast, I am using these examples again to explain stigmas, right? Okay. So I just want to make sure that we have this understanding going in. Okay. All right. So, y'all, check this out. I like to say that I'm at a very mature age. So, there was a time when I was in my 20s and 30s I would be like the age I'm at right now. I'd be like, oh, that's old. Oh, they old. They elderly. But when you move it up a couple of decades and you up there, you like, whoa, wait. This isn't old at all. This is a mature age, I like to call it. So I actually grew up in what I like to call the Archie Bunker from All in the Family era. And some of you may be like, who is Archie Bunker? What is the All in the Family? I get it. Go to your popular search engine and Google Archie Bunker, and that'll give you a quick summary of what I'm talking about. But for all intents and purposes on this show, I'm just going to run through it real fast. So, Archie Bunker, I mean, on that show, this man would just go in on everybody. He would talk about race, he would talk about sexuality, he talked about women, he called people out their names. I mean, nobody was left out. Everybody got it, okay? Okay, so that happened on All in the Family. Or some people may actually be familiar with the Jeffersons. So I grew up with the Jeffersons too. And do you remember George Jefferson? I'm moving on up to the east side to a deluxe apartment. Remember? Y'all, I just love the Jeffersons, okay? That was my favorite show. But also George Jefferson on that show, he talked about everybody too. And the fun fact about George Jefferson is that he actually started on All in the Family as well. So Archie Bunker and George Jefferson made sure that everybody got it, and they went in on everybody that was around them, and they didn't even care. So I brought them up. And what I'm trying to say by bringing them up is that I know that we are now in a cancel culture society, and that the examples that I'm using today is to explain mental health. Okay. All right. So don't think I'm just going in on somebody and trying to make this like an opinionated thing. No, I'm just trying to get the point across about stigmas. So, some of you may actually have your own examples that may come to mind once we start talking about stigmas throughout the show. Please reflect on those. And if you are comfortable enough, I would encourage you to share those stigmas that you have experienced or you have witnessed or that someone has shared with you at good tea and reads with an S on the end at gmail.com. I would love to hear your insights on stigmas as well. And as always, I like to say I am focusing on general mental health information to increase awareness. Awareness is valuable because, like I always say on the outro, awareness of mental health is wealth. So there is no need to challenge me on the would-haves, could-haves, and should-haves, and why didn't you use this example? Why you always talking about race? We're not going to do that, okay? We are merely talking about stigmas. I think I have said that word already about 20 times, and we're in the first 10 minutes of the show. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so what is stigma? In short, the meaning of the word stigma is a mark, a stain, or a blemish. So you already know this isn't going to be good, right? It doesn't even sound good. It doesn't even look good. Okay. So, and here's a little background information about the term stigma. So, stigma was initially described by Irving Goffman in 1963. So, this word's been out there for a while. And he identified stigma as any characteristic or attribute by which a person was devalued, tainted, or considered shameful or discredited. Subsequent work in this area was influenced by the work of Goffman, and the concept of stigma has been explored in many contexts and cultures. Stigma is strongly influenced by cultural and contextual value systems that differ over time and across contexts. However, most authors actually agree with Goffman's basic definition, which identifies the main elements of stigma as labeling, stereotyping, social isolation, prejudice, rejection, ignorance, status loss, low self esteem, low self efficacy, marginalization, and discrimination. So, in other words, stigma is when someone sees you in a negative way because of a particular characteristic or attribute. For example, skin color, cultural background, disability, or mental illness. So, the part we're probably going to focus mostly on is the mental illness piece. In relation to mental illness, stigma is when someone is marked or discredited somehow and reduced from being a whole person to being a stereotype or labeled as a collection of symptoms or as a diagnosis. For example, psychotic. You may hear somebody refer somebody as borderline, somebody as an addict. You get the picture? Because I could go on and on and on. All right. So, for people with mental health issues, the social stigma and discriminations they experience can make their problems worse and making it harder to recover. It may actually cause a person to avoid getting the help that they need because the fear of being stigmatized. So, again, we're going to keep going through these definitions because these are key words that stigma actually does to people. So, literature identifies multiple dimensions or types of mental health related stigmas. So, there's actually levels to the stigma game. So, the ones that we're going to look at specifically are self stigma, public stigma, professional stigma, and institutional stigma. So, stigma refers to the negative attitudes of an individual to their own mental illness, and it's also referred to as internalized stigma. And some people probably can really relate to the self stigma. And self stigma has actually been related to poor outcomes such as failure to access treatment. They won't go seek treatment because of that fear of being devalued. Disempowerment. They may feel like because they do have a mental health illness that they're powerless to that. So why fight? Reduced self-efficacy and a decreased quality of life. If we have these thoughts that we are our mental health illness, then those can have a negative effect on us doing anything about it and how we actually live, right? If we feel like we can't, some people won't because they don't think that they can. All right. So, public stigma refers to the negative attitude towards those with mental illness held by the general public, and it's often based on misconceptions, fear, and prejudice. Also, another stigma, and this is a bonus stigma, I guess if you want to call it, um, is actually related to public stigma. And it's called perceived stigma, which is defined by an individual's belief about the attitudes of others towards mental illness. So, research has actually demonstrated that the significant impact of public stigma, such as discrimination in workplace and public agencies. So, let's go back and look at that. So, the public probably has this idea on what this mental health illness looks like, right? And what's pretty interesting about that is that you have the perceived stigma. And one thing we know about perception, if you don't know anything else about it, that is somebody's thought. And I don't care what you say or what you do, how much research you pull out. You can Google until the cows come home. When somebody has a perception about something, that is what they're going to believe, and you can't change their mind. They can only change their mind. All right, so we'll move on to professional stigma. So, professional stigma occurs when healthcare professionals hold stigmatizing attitudes towards their patients, which are often based on the fear or misunderstanding of the causes and symptoms of mental illness. So, I'm going to give an example before I go on. So, yes, again, remember, yes, we're counselors or therapists. You may hear that name interchangeably, but we're human first and we're counselor slash therapist second. So, there's actually counselors or therapists out there that just cringe when certain diagnoses, when people come presenting with certain diagnoses. There's been times where I've been in a group of people, not at my place of current employment, but just it could be somewhere else. And then if they read through the intake when people come to receive services and they notice that that person has been diagnosed with, for example, borderline personality disorder, you'll have some therapists be like, I just can't stand working with people with borderline personality. Oh my gosh. And they just have a full come apart talking about people. And I mean, that's already creating the stigma. You can almost feel it from what they're saying. So that's one part of public stigma. The second part that professionals may face is when um, from the public or from other healthcare professionals is because of their work, their specific work that they do within the field, and their connection with stigmatized individuals. So, professional stigma is of particular concern because it can affect the care and the treatment a person with mental illness receives. Um, Including treatment for physical illnesses as well. And if you think about it, if it does impact their mental and their physical illnesses, it also impacts their well being and recovery. So, I want to give an example of the second type of professional stigma. And I'll use myself as an example. So, most counselors slash therapists has a certain population that they specialize in. I happen to specialize in people with co-occurring conditions. And what that means is a person could have a mental illness and a substance use disorder. And you just have to navigate both of those at the same time. There's a lot of counselors and therapists that do not like working with people with co-occurring conditions, or they don't know enough to assist in that field. So when they ask, like, hey, Kimberlon, what's your specialty? And I like to say, I specialize in working with people with co-occurring conditions. They like, oh my God, what? Oh, there's no way I could do that. My hat's off to you and blah 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 blah. They do all of that. Like these, these people are human too. Like, back off. But because of the way that people respond when I say that I specialize in working with people with co occurring conditions, that could also, if I didn't know any better, that could actually stop me from even sharing that information. In the way they cringe and grumble and complain and do all of that, I could actually bring that back into the counseling room with me and actually provide biased treatment to clients with co-occurring conditions, and that wouldn't be fair to them. So we got to be mindful of professional stigmas. Lastly, institutional stigmas refers to an organization's policy or culture of negative attitudes and belief towards stigmatized individuals, such as those with mental health problems. So these stigmas can actually be reinforced by legal frameworks, public policies, and professional practices, thereby becoming deeply embedded in society. So, we talked about the different levels of stigmas from self stigma all the way to institutional stigmas. And just think that's just levels, as I mentioned earlier, that's just levels to these things. Unfortunately, these levels actually build upon each other. And the clients are the ones that can get impacted because they will be stigmatized at the other levels. And that's bad enough if you think about it, that they are already having this internalized stigma and they're doing that to themselves. So, can you imagine them getting it from the public, from the professionals, and from the institution? It almost sounds like it's a no-win situation. So it's just so horrible. But in the context of mental health care, stigma has been identified as a major issue for clients and their family. Stigma hinders access to appropriate and professional medical and psychological treatment and can result in a person's condition worsening, or it can result in multiple readmissions. So, usually, when some people are unable to navigate their emotions and they're not seeking help, it may become really overwhelming. And some people may have to go into an inpatient treatment facility to receive the necessary treatment that they need. Um, if they, get stabilized and they get back out on their feet, you know, and they're not receiving any additional support to help them, they actually may experience those same symptoms again and go right back into inpatient treatment again. And the cycle will continue and continue. So it's really important that we get that support for that individual so we can hopefully stop the multiple readmissions. And another readmission I would like to mention to everybody is that not only people will keep going into the hospital to receive treatment, sometimes people with mental illnesses may have multiple readmissions into the jail or the prison system, and that there's very disheartening as well, because if someone actually has a true mental illness, jail or prison is not going to help them, or or their mental illness, and so they'll keep going back in, and it may not be them being the quote unquote bad person for society. It may be those symptoms from that mental illness. So, stigma also affects the client's families or relatives and the professionals who work in the mental health care settings. Everybody is impacted. So, we know people that have mental illnesses, whether they're receiving support or they're not receiving support. There's actually a lot of emotions that comes with that, and it impacts their family members, because family members sometimes don't know how to support, or they don't want to support because it's too much. They dealt with it over and over and over again. And some families actually give up because they're like, well, so and so don't want to get any help. Why should we be sitting here trying to support? In mental health care settings. Honestly, you work with your clients, they come in, you're working, treatment's going good, and then something happens. I always like to say life happens. Whatever that looks like for them happens. And they may not come back, or they may come back doing the same thing over and over again. Sometimes they may, stop taking their meds. And so now we're back to square one. So everybody is actually impacted. So, how can stigmas impact professionals who work in mental health settings, you may ask? I'm glad that you asked. I heard you. I heard you. Um, Even some mental health professionals have negative beliefs about the people that they care for, as I was just mentioning. Um, they may say, oh, they never gonna get better. Oh, this person will never get better. And if you feel like I am putting all this effort in and that person's not getting better, that may limit you as a healthcare professional on the amount of support you give the client, right? Um, Cause and then you may all of a sudden start to have these thoughts. Yes, and these thoughts as a mental healthcare professional, you may start to say, "Oh my gosh, here they come. They just being real extra and real dramatic for attention. They like being like this. They like this. They get something from it." And once you start to think that way, it may actually play out in your treatment. So, our favorite friend, the media, whether it's social media, TV, movies, you name it, that's our friend, can also play a part in reinforcing a stigma by portraying inaccurate stereotypes about people with a mental illness. They can make it real dramatic, and it half the stuff you see on television, y'all, it is not true. Okay? All right. It can sensationalize situations through unwarranted references to mental illness. You can use demeaning and hostile language towards mental illness. For example, if a part of the media associate mental illness with violence, that promotes the myth that all people with mental health issues are dangerous. In fact, research actually shows that people with mental illness are more likely to be victims as opposed to perpetrators of violence. Here are other harmful effects of stigma: feelings of shame, hopelessness, and isolation, reluctance to ask for help or to get treatment. I've seen this so much. I have so many people that I know, that I talk to, that's going through stuff. And hey, let me tell you something. Since I'm a therapist, the first thing I'm gonna say, why don't you go to therapy? And I tell you, even the people that's the closest to me to the furthest away from me can give me a zillion reasons as to why they will not go to therapy. And I'm like, okay, okay, you know, but it's stigma, right? That's what it is. I've heard people say it's too expensive. I can give you resources to where it could be, a sliding scale cost. I can point you where to go. Then I get tons of other excuses. But I do know that people will go when they're ready and when they're ready. And it's a lack of understanding by family, friends, or others. That's why stigmas exist as well. There's also fewer opportunities for employment or social interaction. Um, Again, I know I've worked with clients before, and I do keep their information confidential. But I do know that if I have clients that are struggling with anxiety or depression or have been diagnosed with, bipolar disorder or just anything, they are hesitant to share that information at interviews or with their employers if they're already actively working for fear of being terminated or treated differently. So they just keep it to themselves. And sometimes they may experience an episode at work and it may cause them to get wrote up. But they are so scared to say anything. And it's because of this lack of understanding by family or friends or others, right? Or, in the employment sector. It's hard for them to go out and socialize because they may experience like a panic attack or, they may not know what to say or they just, may have a increased amount of anxiety that may impact their behavior. And some people may perceive them as quote unquote weird or quote unquote crazy and may shy away from them. And this can really make it hard for them to make friends. Um, it causes bullying, physical violence, or harassment. if people, think people have a mental illness, people will pick on them. Like they're already dealing with a lot. But then people who I think have a mental illness, if you pick on somebody with a mental illness, right? But what makes you think that you should pick on them? I mean, I know it happens in school, but let's be real. It also happens with adults too. So it's not a maturity thing for sure. Um, it can cause self doubt. And self doubt is that the belief that you'll never, we talked about this earlier, never be able to overcome your illness or be able to achieve what you want in life. And that almost sounds like a life sentence of going nowhere. And that's hard to navigate when you have those type of thoughts. A reluctance to seek help or treatment. Um, it, as I mentioned earlier, I gave that disclaimer. I know in the Black community, therapy is like, I don't know if this is something that's been instilled. Hey, I don't get them white folks in your business. You don't want them white folks in your business. They gonna think you crazy. People are gonna think you crazy. Whatever happens in this house stays in this house. These are some of the things that you hear in the Black community. And if you're non-Black, you probably have other stigmas that exist in your community. And I would love to hear those so I can add it. So when I go out and speak in the community. Um, and then there is health insurance, right? That doesn't cover your mental illness treatment. You may not have the best health insurance. Unfortunately, our health insurance here isn't the best, right? I mean, I know you have to have some, they have made strides to make sure each and every person can receive health insurance, but it may not be the best. I mean, there was some people that I know to come to a session, and this is with insurance, they're paying anywhere from 90 to $100. And you're talk about having to seek treatment every week. Some people don't have it to give. And the first thing they're going to actually cut, unfortunately, they're not going to cut food or, their rent or anything like that because they need those things, those are the basic needs. The first thing they'll actually cut is therapy, unfortunately. Okay. And so, there could be other things that can actually be considered a stigma that can prevent people from getting the help that they need. All right, so we're going to shift gears because we've talked about things that hinder. But now I want to flip it a little bit and talk about things to empower people so people can actually deal and navigate stigmas. And I would say, honestly, to overcome, right? Because we don't want to just talk about it. We want to do something about it. So we got to overcome it. I mean, we can have so many people agree, yes, that stigmas exist in the community. Oh, we need to do better. Y'all could rah rah with me all day. Rah rah, rah rah rah. I get all of that. We got to overcome, okay? We got to overcome and do something about it. All right. So here's ways that you can deal with stigmas. Go get the mental health treatment you need. Okay? Try not to let the fear of being labeled with the mental illness stop you from getting help. You gotta go. Now, there's sometimes where people can navigate their day to days and probably talk to friends and other supportive people in their lives and be able to get through things. But when it becomes too much and it starts to interfere with your daily activities, whether it's working, going to school, taking care of your personal hygiene, if you notice that effect, you may need to go seek mental health treatment. Doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean that you can't control your life. It doesn't mean that you can't figure out how to handle things yourself. This is all your thoughts that you're thinking. What happens in therapy is that you got to get you a good counselor or therapist. So I'm going to throw that out there too. But what happens is it's a neutral place for you to talk about what you're going through. Neutral mean that person don't know you, don't know anybody you know, don't know anybody at your job, don't know anybody that's in your personal world. And it's a neutral space where you can actually talk freely about whatever presenting problems you are experiencing, and you should be able to talk about those things without judgment, without fear of being judged, I should say. Or but I mean, definitely it comes with building a relationship with that person, though. You got to feel comfortable in order to talk about it. In there, you actually work with that counselor slash therapist to identify strategies to help you deal with whatever mental illness symptoms you are presenting. All right. And then if they feel like you probably need an additional higher level of care, hopefully you'll have that discussion and they'll explain the benefits of seeking that type of help. And I do encourage you, if you're talking to a mental health professional, hence the word professional, you should be able to ask them questions and they should be able to answer those questions to give you that clarity. And I've explained this when I go speak to people, to other healthcare professionals. We know the lingo. We know the lingo of what to say. We understand it. But the average person doesn't understand it. So we may have to just break it down. That's our job, to break it down and also to break down those barriers so you can say, you know what? Let me go try this. And I actually tell clients and I tell friends and other people that ask me about seeking counseling or therapy, I tell them, look, when you go, don't just try it once. Because some people try it once, and if it doesn't feel right, or I feel like I'm just saying this, and they say, just tell me how you feel. How does he make you feel? How does it make you feel? They don't want to go back. No, you got to go back again and you got to go back again. Because remember, you're getting used to actually sharing if you've never shared before. And you're sharing some of these thoughts. So just go and talk to somebody, right? And you'll know if that person is not a good match for you. And you can go find somebody else, okay? All right, I can go on about that forever and ever. Here's another thing about dealing with stigmas. Don't believe it. Okay? Sometimes you hear or experience something long enough, you start to believe it for yourself. So try not to let other people's ignorance, right? If they don't specialize in it, it's ignorance, okay? But try not to let that influence the way you feel about yourself. Okay? Mental illness is not a sign of weakness and is rarely something you can deal with on your own. So, talking about your mental health issues with healthcare professionals will help you on your road to recovery or management. Talking to a mental health professional is similar to talking to a doctor, if you think about it. Because when you go to your doctor and your doctor's like, hey, what's wrong with you? You're not going to say, I'm fine. Usually, when you go to the doctor and you paid that copay, and honestly, no, let me see, I'm just joking. No, but when you're talking to that doctor, you're saying, Doctor, I'm dealing with this. I feel this. Can you check this out? You're actually providing insight into that problem. Same thing with mental health professionals. What's going on? I don't have any energy. I find myself crying throughout the day. That's the type of conversations you got to have. so you can start identifying those strategies. Okay, um so once you start to talk about it, you're actually reducing the power of those stigmas, those thoughts of people are going to think I'm crazy, people are going to think I'm weak. Once you start to talk about it, it's like you're breaking that stronghold, and you can actually start to talk about it more, and it puts you back in control of your situation. So you go from being that diagnosis per se, or being those symptoms, you go, you get back on the track of becoming that whole person with. It puts you back up in front, so you're able to manage your symptoms related to that mental illness. Another thing, don't hide away. Many people with mental illnesses want to isolate themselves from the world. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Please don't. Reach out to people that you trust, that are trusted people and supportive people. Let me throw that in. Families, friends, it may be coaches, it may be religious leaders. They can be that support when you need it. Okay. And so you should know your supports from the associates. Associates are there probably when you need to just kick it, have fun, have laughters. Sometimes those people may not be the ones that you need to go to when you're going through. So, you should know the people that's in your life. Sometimes we act like we can be so surprised when we go talk to some people like, girl, I'm going through, and they sitting up here talking about, I don't know, they little sneaky link or something. You know that's the type of person they are. So don't go to them for support. Find the ones that will give you that undivided attention. And I'm not saying get rid of the friend that wants to talk about the sneaky link. That, hey, maybe they serve their purpose right for you on a good day. But when you need that support, find those ones that's been in your corner. And connect with others. Joining a mental health support group. They're out here, they're everywhere. And you could either do it online or in person. And it can help you deal with those feelings of isolation and make you realize that you're not alone in your feelings or experience. Group work is so fascinating when you see how it works, because sometimes people can't fathom the thought of talking in front of strangers about what they're going through. But let me tell you, once you get in that group, you start to share. There's people you don't know that they're sharing what they're dealing with and what they're going through. It does go ahead and provide that relief. Like, I'm not the only one struggling. I'm not the only one that have loved ones that don't really understand. In those groups, they actually empower each other. And you probably like that because they can identify with what you're going through and how they're getting through. So it does give that sense of support. So man, I like groups. Okay. All right. So you are not your illness. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Get rid of that thought. Okay. Do not define yourself by your illness, or as some other people might. Instead of saying, I'm schizophrenic, you can say, I have schizophrenia. There is power in the language. I have this. I have that. You don't, I hear some people say it, and I know they may get split, and people with co occurring disorders. Yeah, I'm an addict. I mean, I know that some groups probably teach different, but if you want to say that I had a form of addiction, that's again, as I mentioned earlier, separates you from that mental illness. Because some people possibly could say it and feel empowered, but then there's other people that may say I'm schizophrenic, and then that disempowers them. So put some space between that, right? I have bipolar disorder. There's space in between that. And that gives you room to navigate and to continue to overcome that mental illness. And I know some people may be, well, you don't overcome it. What I mean by overcome, I want to go ahead and clarify that. Y'all, people have challenged me before. That's why I have to clarify it here. I hope y'all don't think I'm fussing. I got to actually clarify it. What I mean by overcome is that you learn how to navigate it. Okay. So, yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, going back to physical illnesses, some people, may have a physical illness that they have to provide continual maintenance on or take medication for. You may not overcome it in your lifetime, right? But you've learned how to navigate it. It's the same for mental health. Okay. So that's what I mean by overcoming. And lastly, remember that it's not personal. Remember that other people's judgments often come from a lack of understanding rather than anything else. So these judgments are made before they really get to know you. So do not believe that their views have anything to do with you personally. People will always try to give you advice, try to tell you how to navigate things. It happens. It's just, I guess, being a human. Just shake your head. Okay, awesome. And just, send them on their, oh, you can say thank you and then send them on their way. All right. So let's see. Did I cover everything? One more thing I want to throw in before I end this show, because I know I talked a lot about stigma and I probably said the words probably 100 times during the show, but that's okay. Okay. um, joining, I know I mentioned about joining a support group, but I want to throw a support group out there that I know is probably around the nation, and that's NAMI, NAMI. Actually, you can go to their website and you can find different support groups, probably in your state or even online. They may have different groups that you can go to. NAMI is dynamic. If you're a vet, you can actually go to the Department of Veteran Affairs that's closest to you, and you can also receive mental health treatment. If all else fails, you can go to Psychology Today, and you can actually Google search for somebody on Psychology Today that can help you with whatever you're dealing with. But you can Google also. Just make sure that it takes you to a good site. Okay. And now, lastly, what I wanted to share: speak out against stigma. I just said that way you overcome is talking about it and how to navigate it. And the way I'm talking to you all about stigma today, so many people unfortunately don't make it into the counseling/therapy room to see me. So I actually go out into the community, and that's why I'm doing the podcast. I speak to other healthcare professionals. I'll speak to the community about mental health. It is power in speaking about mental illnesses and speaking about stigmas because, as I mentioned earlier, it dilutes that power. I can guarantee you every time I talk about stigmas or talk about mental health, I talk to about probably two people or more about their own personal testimonies related to mental illness and about how stigmas have held them back. And I try my best to empower them because I always say it's one of me, but there's so many mental health professionals, but it's not enough of us to reach everybody in the world. So even you that's listening today, whatever you're dealing with, right? And you get the tools that you need to overcome. I want to encourage you also to use your voice and talk about stigmas and talk about mental health, because that can actually help somebody else. And before you know it, we're getting the word out, right? And we are all making a difference together. So, this has been really exciting. I like to say that these shows are exciting, because when I have to sit here and talk to myself, I'm like, okay, look at me. There I go. I'm dealing with my stigma, but I'm overcoming it also. But I hope that this was beneficial for you. I hope you could share this with somebody, because it's very important that we overcome stigmas, right? It's not going to be overnight and it's not going to be quick. But I just feel like one voice saying it to another voice, that it can become contagious, and at least we can get the word out about stigmas. All right. Awesome. So now I'm back on track. We're going to be back on track. I'm looking up another good subject for us, but you'll have to come back because I'm not going to throw out a clue on what I'm going to talk about next time. Nanny, nanny, boo boo. Just joking. Y'all, I just want to let everybody know that Good Tea and Reads is available on Spotify. It's available on Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio. And I'm still trying to do a little something, something to get the word out. Um, Still working my way up to bring people on the show. I'm trying to figure out how to navigate all my little tools that I have. Y'all, I'm getting there. I am getting there. I just want to make sure when I bring somebody on here that it is on point. So that is my goal. But all right, so go do something fun, relaxing. Remember, if you have a busy life, take those few minutes out to just breathe, right? Breathe it out. Take care of yourself, okay? Be the best version of you, and whatever that looks like. And to those persons out there with mental illness, remember, you are not your mental illness. You are someone that have that mental illness, and you have the tools in your toolbox to navigate that mental illness. Those that may be struggling with mental illness, or maybe struggling with some symptoms that you see that's impacting your daily activities, I encourage you to go seek mental health treatment from a professional, okay? Again, if you don't feel comfortable with them after two times, right? You're not gonna feel comfortable the first time. How many of you went to the gym before and took like a Zumba class or something like that, and it just tore you up, and you like, oh no, I'm not going back. No, go back again, because you would go back to that class again and try, right? So I encourage you to do that with therapy. Again, it is challenging, but there's a difference between you being challenged and feeling uncomfortable. If you continue to feel super uncomfortable, you may have to find another counselor slash therapist. All right. So this has been great. This has been awesome. And now our time in this podcast is about to end. You all are awesome. You are marvelous. And you are more than enough. And it is okay not to be okay. All right. And stigmas are a blemish, a mark, or a stain. So we don't want that on us. We want to reduce these stigmas. We want to be clean. We want to be so fresh and so clean, clean. So we want to turn that thing around, and we want to learn how to navigate. Okay. Well, this has been great. Do something great. Y'all, I feel like I'm at church or something. I don't want to close this out because I miss y'all and I don't want to leave y'all. But I am. This has been great and another great episode of Good Tea and Reads. Until next time, have a great night. This has been another fabulous episode on Good Tea and Reads. I am your host, Kimbralon B, and I want to leave you with one message. If you or someone you know is struggling or is in crisis, help is available. You can call or text 988 or you can chat at 988lifeline.org. One more option, you can also text Mental Health of America at 741-741. Choose to not suffer in silence. And remember, awareness of mental health is wealth. Signing off.